Welcome to Trail Manners, the podcast so dedicated to mountain trails and running that they broadcast out of a 78 Volkswagen bus in the mountains. Who does that? Eric and Joel are your hosts and will bring you the trail life as you may have not heard it before. You hear about everything from gear reviews, nutrition to keep you upright and moving forward, and they'll even bring guests into the bus for conversations that you won't hear anywhere else. It's time for some running adventures on a higher elevation. The old 78 Volkswagen bus is fired up and headed to the mountains. Here are your hosts for Trail Manners, proudly representing the 801 with their passion and love for the trails. Eric Manning and Joel Hatch.
Welcome to the Trail Manners Podcast, episode number 47, yet again, another Outdoor Retailer Series special. We're still here at the UltrAspire house, talking with Jason Poole and Charles Corfield. So if this is your first time listening, then thanks for coming. The Trail Manners Podcast is produced every week for enjoyment, and show notes are found at trailmanners.com. Come back often, and please feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Trail Manners. All links are in the show notes. Now let's get after it. Okay, welcome to yet another Trail Manners Podcast from the Outdoor Retailer Show. We are winding down.
Yep.
Last show of the day. We started early.
We did.
Got two new guests on the show.
Right.
So we have Jason Poole.
Yep.
And Charles Corfield. So,
hello. Hi guys.
So we're gonna get right into it because there's so much to say.
I'm gonna preempt something.
All right, I'm ready.
So at the end of the show, we always ask, who do you want somebody to play you in a movie theater?
Okay.
All right. I want Jason. He's a good-looking fella. He's got a good head of hair.
He's got a good head of hair.
He does. He's got. And when I met him yesterday, I was like, now that's a good-looking fella, and that's probably not been said enough about him.
Do you want to switch me spots?
And then I might need to. And then you know, we met Charles, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's crazy smart.
Yeah, right. I know.
And I'm consistently surprised at this gig and the people we meet.
Yeah.
And I feel really lucky.
Yeah.
And really blessed because, I mean, Charles is whip smart, right? We got to meet somebody else really smart a couple weeks ago, Dominic Layfield.
Yeah.
If you've never met him, very, very smart individual, right? You know, MIT,
Oxford.
And Oxford, yeah. They don't let anybody in there, right?
I went to high school.
So I just want to say that, you know,
I should interject at this point.
I
went to the real Cambridge, not the false one at MIT.
Okay, well, there you go. I'm going to set my microphone down. I'm going to go sit outside.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're at the end of our long day. We've had some great interviews, and we were talking right before we went on the air. Charles had this great story that if we're lucky, we're going to get to hear it again.
Yeah.
Right? And Jason's no slouch. He's been around.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
I mean, we tried our best to stalk him, but all his stuff really is not on Ultra Sign Up.
As we found out.
Yeah, and somebody had to spill the beans. Right? Where is she? She's really good at spilling the beans.
Yeah,
Melanie. She ran away.
She did run away. Bryce is like Melanie. So let's just get into it. So Jason, you know, we've talked about this, and your first Ultra was 1996.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that?
You know, that was the Ice Age 50. It was up
Okay.
in Wisconsin.
Right.
And how that came about was, at that point, I don't think I'd ever run more than about 12 miles at any given time. But I was hooked in with a team who was preparing for the Eco Challenge.
Right. That was really big back then.
Really big, yeah. And we were preparing for the race that was up in British Columbia.
Right.
One of our training events, a couple of us went up to run a 50.
Right.
And that race, it was very warm, hot and humid, as you might expect, in the middle of the summer. But went out and knocked it out, had a really good finish, surprised myself, A, for just finishing, and then B, finishing pretty well, you know, so I surprised myself. And that kind of just got me hooked into the idea that, hey, this might be something I could hang around with for a while. So that was 20 years ago.
Wow.
And still doing it.
So this is what I like to bring up when we run into a guest that's done some races like this, like say 20 years ago. Right. Now the resources at our fingertips to find nutrition,
instantly,
hydration, you know, all the tips and tricks to run these. So you've done a 12-mile race. Now you're jumping into a 50. How did you prepare? Like, how did you know what you needed, what you think you might need? Because 12 miles, 50 miles. There's a little bit of a difference in
There's
there.
a difference, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, back then, Bryce can attest to this. Your options were very limited. You
Right.
had just a couple of nutritional companies offering products
Like
Gatorade.
Power Bar.
Power Bar.
Power Bar.
Exactly. And
the little bricks.
I was hooked into Power Bar,
Right.
for many years, and that's what you had, right?
Right.
And you made it work, or you tried to make it work.
Right.
It was a challenge. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, it was a challenge getting through that first race. Really, really dehydrated when it was all said and done.
Right.
But it's significantly different, and Charles could probably speak to this even more, maybe if he was involved, earlier than I was. But we're so lucky now to have almost too many options, right? You got too many flavors to choose from, and you got too many types of bars and
Right.
gels, and so
Yep.
it can get really complicated now.
Yeah, you got tablets, you got pills, you got
Chomps.
blocks, you got,
Solids,
Chews,
and, yeah,
wafers.
Wait, those wafers are pretty good. Come on, they are.
But yeah, it's always interesting to me because it's something that we definitely take advantage of, or take for granted.
Take for
How's
granted,
that?
right?
So you can pick people's brains, but now
Yep.
there's so many more people doing it.
Right.
So much more success at it. Because 1996. I'd never even heard of an ultra race.
Right.
I'm
Yeah,
not-
you
I'm
were
not
playing
even kidding.
soccer.
I was a soccer
You were
guy.
a soccer
Yeah.
nut.
Yeah, I
Right.
heard of marathons, but I'm like, I got no desire for that. I just
Right.
want to chase a ball around the field,
Right.
the rest of my life. So
Right.
it's always interesting to me to see where things have morphed.
Right.
What people used, how they got their information. I mean, did you talk to anybody, or did you just go right into it?
We kind of jumped into it. Oddly enough, before I did that first 50, and I'll say that was my first ultra, but that same year was the first year I did a little event called the Barkley Marathon.
Little one.
It's become
Itsy.
kind of household name now,
Right.
because of the Netflix documentary that's come
Right.
out. But,
Which was a good movie, right?
It was good. It did a pretty good job of
Yeah.
representing the kind of the flavor of the race, that kind of thing. But
Right.
that same group of folks that was training for the Eco Challenge decided one of our lady that was part of our team had been down to do the Barkley
Right.
before, and she kind of hooked us into, hey, there's this race in Tennessee. I think I can get us a spot in the race, and let's go down and try it. And that was, like I said, that was 20 years ago. At the time, you could basically get into Barkley very easily.
Right.
Not like today's challenges of getting in the race. And so we went down and made about made one loop around, and then a couple of the teammates dropped out, and then a few of us more made another half a loop, and then that was the day. That was it. And we were eating Snicker bars, we were drinking Gatorade. Just the nutrition. Back to your nutrition question and that kind of thing. There weren't options, viable options back then.
Right.
So we. And that was probably part of the reason for failure,
Yeah.
I mean, we just didn't have good choices back then.
Right.
So.
Well, because Jay, you've done Barkley. You've been in Barkley how many times again?
This year was back for my 7th time.
Oh, my
7.
goodness.
Yeah, I got a fun run finish and another 3-loop finish this year. And so it's been a part of my life for 20 years.
Well, and then you've got Hardrock, Leadville, Cruel Jewel, UTMB, Tour de Gent.
Yep.
The list goes on and on. 2-time 24-hour National Orienteering champion. How many times Echo Adventure Racing, did you say, 10 years? Or?
Yeah, I did about 10 years of adventure racing around the world. Eco Challenge, Southern Traverse down in New Zealand. So all over. It's been some great experiences. that's
So
for sure.
when Joel
Some
talks
movie
about
roles, too.
when Joel talks about movie roles and your good head of hair, underneath that head of hair is a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge
lot
on
of
some of
gray.
this stuff, right?
A lot of gray in there.
Because nowadays, when you talk about some of the races you've done, those are the creme de la cremes. Hardrocks and Leadvilles and Barkley and Tour de Gent, UTMB, and you've done them all, right? So, come on. It's pretty overwhelming, right? Joel likes a head of hair. I like what you've accomplished. How's that?
Thank you.
No,
It's fun. It's been good fun over the years,
It's amazing, right? That he's
Yeah.
been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah.
We talk about the first generation of those kind of pioneers, right?
Yep.
And he's one of them.
Yep.
He's seen it all, and he's stayed in it. He's stayed healthy for the most part because he's still here.
Yep.
And he's got a story to tell.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of what we're trying to do.
Going
recently,
for.
right?
Well, and so while we're on it real quick before we jump into something else, how do you do the longevity of it?
Right.
Because you still love it, or you still wouldn't be doing it. I mean, so how did you stay that longevity in it, still have the passion for it, still enjoy what you do?
Right. Yeah. You know, it's probably because it's kind of an unorthodox training program that I have. So I'm not real structured. I've kind of just over the years, just trained kind of by feel. You know, it hasn't been structured. If I felt like running, I'd go out and run, or if I felt like doing this adventure, I'd go do that adventure. You know, and I think that's part of it. You see lots of guys these days who are, you know, it's been alluded to earlier. You know, there's just race after race after race. They get hooked in with some sponsors,
Right.
and I think it really starts to beat a person down. You know, so by I guess regulating my races, you know, I mean 1 or 2 kind of key races each year. It just keeps it interesting. You know, it keeps you motivated. You get a goal, you focus on it, you accomplish it. Generally, have a good result, and then the interest just continues. You know, year after year after year. So it's pretty interesting to see now this younger crew coming in. You know, and some of these guys, like the guy that won Western States this year. You know,
He's 20.
Andrew Miller.
yeah. I mean,
Isn't that
you know,
amazing?
he's less than half my age.
Right.
You know, I'm dating myself here, but it's on one hand, it's super impressive.
Right.
On the second hand, it's kind of it puts things in perspective for me to think, wow, you know, I'm still doing this after that long. You know, now those guys are half my age, you know, more. So
what haven't you done? I mean, you've done so much. What haven't you done that you still want to do, whether it's a race, adventure, you know, what it is? I mean, there's something that's still lingering out there.
Yeah, for sure. So later this month, there's an event many listeners may know called Nolan's 14. And I'm going to make an attempt on Nolan's 14 with a friend of mine. It's an event that's run in the Sawatch Range of Colorado.
Right.
The mountain range that kind of runs from Leadville down to Salida. And in that range, there's 14,000-foot peaks, roughly in a row.
Right.
And the idea behind that is to make it across all 14 peaks and down in 60 hours or less.
Wow.
So it's a pretty big undertaking. It's roughly 100 miles.
Right.
With approximately 45,000 feet of elevation gain.
And not really an established trail.
Not really an established trail. No, you kind of pick your route. That's kind of where I hope my orienteering background can kind of come in handy.
Ooh,
there.
yeah.
You know, route choice is key. If there's a trail and you can utilize it, it's great. If there's not, then you just head down to Screefield and make your way over to the next peak. But you know, one of the big challenges I think with that is, you know, altitude, right? You know, and people are always concerned about going to Leadville for altitude and that kind of thing for that race, or Hardrock. And this event, you know, will keep us up above 10,000 feet almost the whole time.
Right.
So.
Well, and like you said, you're up to 14 and you're back down. You're up to 14 and back down. So that takes its toll on your body itself.
Yeah, so that's an upcoming adventure. It's not a race,
Yeah.
but it's something that, you know, has interested me for about 6 years, I guess, or so.
Right.
And now just seems like we've got the right partner involved. It's the right opportunity, right time.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. We'll definitely follow you when you do that.
Yeah, for sure,
Right?
because that's always fun for us. I mean, we know Jared Campbell. We know people have done it, and it's
Sure.
just it's awe-inspiring for
It
sure.
is. It's
just to see people
pretty
do
cool.
that.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna jump over to Charles.
Yeah, because he's been really quiet.
He's been quiet because we haven't ignored you.
He just told the most amazing story before we got on the pod. And I was trying to push to get him on the podcast. I'm like, because he's telling this story that just blows your mind. Right.
So you've been in the game for a couple of years, right?
Yeah, I think.
So you got to hold it up here.
Yeah,
You got.
sorry.
You want the microphone right there.
Yeah, there we go.
That's how these work. All right.
Okay.
So yeah, you've been doing this for a couple of years.
Yeah, one or
right?
two.
So you've got over 100 ultra finishes.
Yep.
First of all, but we were kind of talking to you going down because, like we said, we do a lot of Facebook stalking. But there's a lot of stuff you do that may not show up on what's ultra signups,
Right,
Or recently on Facebook.
It's not on Snapchat.
Yeah, Snapchat. Whoever does that.
Yeah.
But you've been to the top of Everest,
Yeah.
the Himalayas.
Yep.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously,
Right.
I mean, we get to talk to the coolest people ever.
I know.
It's like I get to do this for fun.
I know.
Right? But I mean, tell us some of your background though, because Cambridge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, going way back when, I guess like many people, I was introduced to running at high school. I grew up in England, so much like Ian, I did high school cross country. And my job there was to fill out the rankings. I'm solid middle of the pack material genetically. And But I found it kind of fun because one of the conversations we had that I still remember from high school is, well, who amongst us is going to be running in 20 years' time?
Right.
When we start to think about when we're going to be old men of 40. And
Well, thank you.
you're very welcome.
Thank you.
Touchy.
Calling me 40. I appreciate that.
And we hypothesized then that the people who were the stars would probably give it up because there's going to come a point when they're not a star any longer.
Right.
And so it'll be hard on their motivation to stay in the game. Whereas those of us who did it because it was generally believed to be a good idea and good for your fitness and good for health might well still be doing it in 20 years' time. Well, now I can report on the outcome of that hypothesis. It turned out to be true that all the stars that we knew of back then have long since given up, and all of us plodders who were there in the middle of the bell curve just kept on doing it.
Kept plodding.
Kept plodding.
Yes.
And so after spending a bunch of time in the 1990s, basically being Brad Washburn's gopher on Mount Everest so he could get the height of Mount Everest but measured with GPS equipment, I realized I could plod for a very long time.
Right.
And so life after Everest had me looking around for other things which involved doing something for a very long time. There may be a personality trait here, which is that perhaps if you're slightly Asperger's and can find putting your one foot in front of the other 200,000 times in a row eternally fascinating.
How many times have you actually counted that high during a race? Because it seems like you have experience in doing this.
Actually, about 74 times.
That's good.
But we laugh about it, but there's probably a bit of a personality trait where people will self-select into doing these endurance events because they can stay on task for hours at a time. And so that next footstep you take is as fascinating as the previous footstep you took, and you're
Right.
happy to repeat that process for hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there is a personality trait which comes into being able to do these. And also in my case, because my background, I'm an applied mathematician, so I get curious and interested about things which are often not very interesting to other people. And so what it took to take somebody who is maybe, shall we say, not a naturally gifted mutant, like we see nowadays, these just incredibly talented young athletes coming onto the scene. But what does it take for somebody who's more middle of the pack to, shall we say, get themselves as far forward in the pack as they can? And so I looked at it as being something of a science project for me. So the ultras are, how do you take the hand you're dealt, and what simple bits of science can you apply to it to run that race as smart as you can? And where we were talking about all these supplements and what have you, the problem is for most ultra runners, they really actually have no idea whether a supplement is any good or not, because
Right.
they don't know the physiological basis of whether it's pure placebo or what the mechanism is available to them which can enhance their performance. Well, I'm not intimidated at going into the literature and thinking through the physiology here. And so I've been able, in my own case, to run various experiments to test out ideas.
Right.
For example, people who run long distances often complain about sour stomachs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of their performance limiting things. They just can't choke down enough food.
Right.
Yep.
But do they ever stop to ask, well, why does my stomach act up?
Right.
And the physiology is actually pretty simple, and there's a fairly simple potential cure available to them as well. But I never see it really discussed in the literature. But here goes. Here's a podcast.
No, we're ready.
Everyone, tune in. Here's an experiment you can go do yourself. So one of the reasons you get a sour stomach and nothing's going through is because your blood is shunted away from your GI tract.
Right.
And the sphincter, that is that valve at the bottom of your stomach, is just not relaxing.
Right.
So everything backs up in your stomach, nothing gets into your intestine to be absorbed. And you know what happens? Stomach gets overfull, stomach empties.
Right. So
on
you're
the side
throwing
of
up.
the trail.
Yep.
You throw up. Well, there's a very simple drug which outside of America is over the counter. So you can go into any chemists, as we would say in the British Empire, former, now ex-colony of Europe, or shortly to be. And you can go and get Motilium or domperidone. It's a non-sedating antiemetic which will relax the pyloric valve or pyloric sphincter at the bottom of your stomach. My bet is that for most endurance athletes who have stomach troubles, if you take 10 milligrams of domperidone or Motilium every 6 hours, you will find that that sour stomach never comes on.
Okay, so here's a question that we have to ask. Very obvious. Is this a banned substance?
No.
That was quick
Do you
and
need
easy.
a prescription for it
You would
in the U.S.?
Yes.
In the U.S. So then it probably is going to fall under that category of you. Now, we're not advocating you go out and you get this because we don't want anybody getting in trouble, right?
But you aren't advocating it, and I certainly ain't prescribing it because I'm not a physician.
Right.
So,
But I'm telling you the physiology.
Right.
And if you, an athlete, want to go out and find out for yourself,
Right.
Put in your asterisk here about go consult with your physician who
Right.
probably hasn't heard of it. But you can go and do the research and experiment yourselves.
well, that was my question. Is so what is it? What's it used for treating? Like, what's
its general?
Yeah.
Well, in America, it would actually be used for lactation problems. That would be the prescription use of it.
So it'd be hard.
But for Commonwealth countries, it's just an over-the-counter antiemetic. And unlike antiemetic agents available in the US, it's non-sedating, which is its attraction that it doesn't make you go to sleep.
Gotcha. Wow.
But that is not so much here to discuss medicine as physiology, that think through why are you getting a sour stomach. The reason
Right.
is usually fairly simple. It's a blood shunt
Right.
away from your GI tract, and your stomach is not emptying.
Right.
Ergo, how do you make your stomach empty? There are other reasons about what you may want to put in your stomach, which has to do with how fast your stomach can move stuff through to the intestine where it will be absorbed. So, one of the things, and this is basically the physiology behind Hammer products, is that, and the other gels, is that maltodextrin is one of the easiest compounds to move through your stomach, because a 20% solution of maltodextrin will go through relatively unimpeded, whereas if I give you a glucose solution, I can only get 6 or 7% glucose through. So when you think about your caloric requirements on a long-distance run, the amount of fluids you would have to drink with just glucose that can move through your stomach would be prodigious.
Right.
Ergo, use maltodextrin instead, because a much smaller volume can deliver the same number of calories. The bad news is that often these products have other things in them which
Right.
are pretty icky after 30 miles.
They are.
So,
I think that's a good way to describe it.
Very
That's-
icky
That's
on
how your
some
mouth
stuff.
feels. It's
So,
icky.
you know, a tip to people is if you're willing to put a little skin in the game, go order maltodextrin powder online. I mean, you can get a tub of 8 pounds or a sack of 12 pounds on Amazon for a very modest price. Go make up your own maltodextrin gels. There's some great flasks from UltrAspire. You can go put them in. So you can make up your own, put your own flavoring in, and I would advise avoid sugar. So put coffee in, put cocoa in, put vanilla in, put soup in,
Right.
whatever turns your crank. Make up your own. You'll save a ton of money. you'll have all the physiology in your favor
Right.
and none of the sort of sundry guff, which can make as I say, make these products pretty icky after a
Right.
while. You know, another example, there's the simple science of it, about how to get calories
Right.
in the system. So you can see here, part of my approach to it is I can't tell you much about how to coach you to be a better runner in terms of running form or how many miles you should run this week. But I can tell you a lot about how you can do simple things to tilt the odds in your favor.
Right.
That is what I found very fascinating about ultra running as this sort of problem in physiology. Now, in my case, my analogy would be it's a bit like driving an old clunker across country. I mean,
Or a 78 Volkswagen bus.
yeah, basically, you know, it's underpowered.
There we go.
There we
It
go.
squeaks.
There we go.
And
Stinks.
You have stinks.
Yeah.
You have to watch all the fluid levels and
Yep.
every meter you can, and heaven help you when blue smoke comes out the tailpipe.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Been there.
But it's a constant battle to monitor your physiology as you're running around a race. So
Right.
some of it's psychology, and some of it is really just trying to figure out what's really my worst problem right now.
Yeah.
You know, what do I need to be preventing from happening in
Right.
the next 30 minutes or an hour? So you can see here, I'm a sort of mad scientist who meets ultra running.
I like that because now
I
I'm going
do.
to go put some multidextrin in my bus.
Yeah.
See if that gets the clunker across the country, right?
You're doing that trip by yourself, buddy.
You know, that's a testable hypothesis. Let us know how it goes.
Yeah. He did not step up for that experiment,
I know,
did
right?
he?
He did. He passed that one right on
Yeah,
to
he-
me.
yeah.
Right on to me. So some of the things that you've done. I mean, you have seriously a myriad of things between Everest, Himalayas, and the studies you do.
Yeah.
What keeps you doing this? I mean, you talk about plodding along. I mean, what keeps you doing these adventures, doing these races, being a part of that culture?
Well, I'm always curious about things. I
Right.
always like to know what I can get this old clunker to do. I take a leaf out of Buzz Burrell's notebook, which is always have a sense of adventure. So it's not necessarily about racing. It's about finding just interesting routes to go do. Or they're just some things you just end up, you always want to go back because they're always interesting. For me, the White Rim.
Okay.
You know, I've run the White Rim, the circuit there. It's about 100 miles round, so I've run it a number of times. Pete Backwin told me at some point that I'd run it more times than everybody else put together or something like that.
Oh my goodness.
But it's the kind of route where, you know, the mountain bikers asked me, have you ever ridden the White Rim? So I said, well, sort of, yeah. I chained my bike to the gate at the bottom of the Schaefer Trail, and I picked it up when I was done.
I rode home.
Yeah.
That was my transportation to do it on foot.
Well, that's to get in and out on the potash or on the main park road.
So with what I mean, you guys have both seen. You know, it's been a topic what we're doing the change with running and ultra running and things like that. I mean, what I like to get from people is like, what kind of advice would you have for somebody that's
Just getting into it.
getting into it? Because we get a lot of people that, you know, for our show especially, it's like, okay, you talk to the ultra runners. I'm never going to run 100, but
Right.
I'm really interested in getting on the trails, but
Yeah.
kind of intimidated. And there's
Right.
so much literature and information. But what kind of advice? I mean, you guys are full of knowledge,
Right.
you know, from experience. What kind of
Right.
advice do you have for people that want to get into the
You know, I
trail
saw
thing?
it's a good question. I saw an interesting statistic. I think it was in ultra running recently about the number of runners who are doing ultras in 2015, and they said of all the runners that ran, only 8% had done the 100-mile distance.
Right.
So the other 90+% of the people start out with shorter races. You know,
Right.
and I think that's a good suggestion. Really, I don't think, you know, maybe what I did and jumping right into a 50 from not really running before probably wasn't the best idea, but at the time, you know, it made sense for what we were trying to do. But I would
Right.
say, you know, just bite off a little bit at a time, right?
Right.
So get your feet wet with it. Once you do that, I think, you know, you quickly figure out, okay, this sport's for me or it's not for me,
Right.
you know? And I can't tell you the number of times, I know my wife can attest to this, is I'll finish a race and I say, all right, I'm done.
Yeah.
I am done. I'm never running
doing this again.
Exactly. So
and 2 days later, you are.
I'm looking at the internet, like, all right, well, when do I need to sign up for this next race? So, and there probably is a commonality among a lot of ultra runners, that we have short memories, right?
We do.
We're going through miserable times out there, but not long after that, then you realize, hey, I'm looking for the next adventure. So, I'd say, start off slow. I'd say talk to peers,
right.
Talk to friends who have some experience. Get their take on things. There's a lot of knowledge out there that's just from firsthand experience.
Right.
and you do that, and you can determine if it's a sport for you or not. So.
And I think the unique part about it is we have this discussion all the time, and we were in the same position, right, when you first get into it. And I think the beauty of the community of the trail or ultra running community is people are super. They're ready to give you information.
Absolutely.
It's not like they're holding back or they don't want you to get involved. It's like they're genuinely excited, almost to have you come join their tribe. So if you it's like, I know when I first started,
it's a very open community.
Yeah, I was always nervous to ask that stupid question.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, I'm not going to say anything. Then I'd go out and something bad had happened. Man, I should ask that question.
Yeah.
No,
and I have a lot of people come up to me and are interested, first timers. How do I get in the sport?
Right.
What do you suggest? That kind of thing. And it tickles me. Just to be able to see somebody else express an interest in the sport. If I'm able to give them one tidbit of information, great, but I think it's a pretty likable, pretty approachable crowd. A lot of the races that I do are smaller races, Hardrock as an example,
Right.
less than 150 runners, right? So each time you get lucky enough to get a chance to go back down there, you're seeing people that good friends. It's a family type feel, right? And people are inviting, right? People are open to help you, open to give you suggestions. It's a neat community for sure. I had a pretty unique experience last night. I'll go ahead and throw this out. I had the opportunity to run with one of my icons in the sport, Rock Horton.
Oh yeah.
And Rock said, hey, meet me after the show.
Yeah.
I'm going to take you up on a special run.
You don't say no.
You don't say no. So
it doesn't matter what commitments you already had.
That's right. Out the window.
You're out there.
Yeah, I'm gone. Yeah, so I parted ways with Bryce and the crew from UltrAspire.
And they understood.
And absolutely. They said, you got to go. You got to go. So went to Rock's house. I didn't have running stuff with me, really. I had my shoes. He's like, I'll give you a pair of shorts. I'll give you a shirt. You can borrow a pack. I got some gels.
He might have a headlamp or two.
He might. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he took me down in his man cave. He's probably going to be mad that I tell you about this.
Yeah, come on, spill the beans.
It is a room that it's amazing. It's bigger than any showroom that I'd seen. And gear floor to ceiling. Yeah. Amazing. So we suited up. Headed up into.
Probably had your own changing room, didn't you? Right?
You would think so. Yeah. Yeah. It was fantastic. Drove up. He took me up on the Wasatch course.
Yeah.
Did
you guys go in the Sprinter?
What's that?
Did you guys go in his Sprinter? He's got a Sprinter.
No, we did not go in the Sprinter.
Okay.
No. Went in Catherine's car. But, I'd never done Wasatch. So he's like, okay, this is the aid station, one of the aid stations for Wasatch. We're going to head out from here.
Right.
And he took
So where'd
me
you
up
guys start at?
Up Mill Creek.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
By Desolate.
By Desolate. Did you guys go on the new section of the course up there? They cut this new trail up there.
They cut some new. He showed me kind of what was the old trail. And
right.
He said,
it's like super troughed up there.
Yeah, exactly. But, we started, evening hours, just a beautiful, quiet evening.
Right.
Not a lot of people on the trail. And he just wove story after story for me about his experience on the in the Wasatch race, whether it was racing it, whether it was pacing it.
Yeah.
Talking about the Crimson Cheetah, and only a handful of women had achieved this massive result at this race, and how he was involved with pacing, several of them and helping them achieve their goal, right? And that's kind of the thing. It's a great community of people, and I think that's part of the reason that I've stayed with it so long. The people that I've met here in the community, it just keeps you coming back for sure.
The stories are amazing.
Well, and there's something to be said. Like you said, Rock's talking about other people's races.
Yeah,
Right.
It wasn't like he was out there saying, yeah, when I ran, it's like, man, it was cool pacing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily
Because
his
Rock's,
accomplishment.
he's a good runner.
Oh, he's well accomplished
Right?
and done it all, and
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
one of the most respected there is, right?
Absolutely.
With that.
Absolutely. Phenomenal guy.
But you see that because me and Joel talk about it. We've done on shows. We have friends that we've done, say, hundreds before them, so they came to us first sometimes.
Right.
And, sometimes for us even, it's like, I don't know if I should be giving you advice.
Exactly. Why are you coming to me?
Yeah, right.
Just because I got a podcast doesn't mean I know what I'm doing.
But when you see him finish, it's almost like you're saying, it means just as much to you, almost
Yeah.
like, wow, that is the
for
neatest thing to see them accomplish that. Because you know what it's like, right? When people ask you questions, you know what it's taken to accomplish that, whether it's the training, the being away from your family, because we talk about how this is really a selfish sport.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
You
it really
gotta
is.
have a supportive. If you're married, you
Right.
gotta have a supportive spouse.
Yep.
And so that's critical.
Yeah, so it's just neat to hear you say. I mean, with Rock, I mean, some of the stories was pace these to their Crimson Cheetah,
Right.
But that's how it is with most people that we even come across and talk to. Ian Sharman and Jeff Brownings and the people that are podium, or if you will,
Right.
100-mile wins.
Absolutely.
They talk about other people.
Yep.
It's not necessarily, I don't want to talk about me, but this one guy, this one person I coached did this. So that's why we kind of come back to what advice you have, because you've done it all and you get just as much joy out of seeing somebody, do
Oh yeah.
somebody that's
see
asked
them
you for advice.
yeah, see them reach their goal. That's
Right.
the thing. I think it's special that way.
Yeah. And so what about for you, Charles? I mean, far as, where advice you have, could you talk about, all the experiences you've had being the plotter, the
Right.
middle of the pack? Because, I mean, let's face it, most of the people that run are the middle of the pack, the
They are.
majority. It's not the elite. What kind of advice would you have for people that want to get into it, or not even get into it, but like have some longevity into it?
Yeah, well, for people starting out, one of the things I think about again is from the physiology, what are they going to be experiencing? And what's going to happen is their muscles are going to respond first. And so they're going to improve very quickly from where they are. And it's going to be a great confidence builder. And now comes the danger, because bones, tendons, and ligaments are tissues which respond on a much longer time scale than muscles. So the old advice about make haste but slowly is to get them to rein it back in the early days, because their muscles will get out ahead of their tendons, bones, and ligaments, and they'll get an overuse injury, a tendinitis, they'll pull something,
Right.
and then they'll go through, the depths of the depression, that, oh, I'm injured, I can't
Right.
do anything. And then you've got to go through the suck it up phase, where you've got to encourage people that, no, the reason you're hurting is because your body is adapting. This is not bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to pass. This is not going to hurt all the time. Your tissues are responding now. And so if you just keep plugging away,
Right.
you'll come through that phase. Now, a little further on, people are thinking about, say, their first marathon. This is their Mount Everest.
Yep.
They have no idea if they can do it or not.
Right.
I mean, it is such an iconic event for people to run. So there's this tremendous apprehension which leads up to that first marathon. Well, of course, physiologically, they probably are quite capable of doing it. It's more of a mental block. Well, now some months later, they actually do it. And now they realize they can do a marathon.
Right.
And this is where you begin to see people thinking about, well, if I could do the Mount Everest, what else could I do?
Well, they get to the top of the mountain and they're like, oh, there's another mountain over
Yeah,
there.
it's
It's a
false
little bit
summit.
bigger.
Yeah, and actually I can do this.
Right.
And then let's move the time machine along a bit further. You realize they've got to a point where they go, I could do a marathon any day of the week.
Right.
I've done enough of them. I know how to work. I know I can do a 50K now, or
Right.
I know I can do a 50-miler. Now let's move the clock on a bit further. And this is where, to my mind, you see your fellow humans and citizens both at their best and at their worst. Now picture, say, the finish of a 100-miler like Leadville. This is an uphill finish in full view of a grandstand of people
Right.
and everybody in the universe who seems to be standing along that road you have to come up.
Right.
And the time is now, this is the last hour of the race. And you're seeing people coming up. These are not the podium finishers. These are people for whom this is not a race against the winner. This is a race against themselves. And they've had to dig very deep to get to the bottom of that hill. And goodness me, they find it in themselves that they can pick up the pace. You see people running uphill finishes.
Right.
And now let's move a little bit further ahead in time. We're now down to the last few minutes. That shotgun blast is going to go off. And you see somebody just come around the corner at the bottom of the hill. And there is this sort of visceral electricity that builds in the crowd as they cheer this person to sort of inject them with the energy. Can they get across the finish line before that shotgun goes off? That, to me, is some of the best parts of ultra running you will ever see.
Right.
It's not the podium finisher. It's those people who are your average Janes and Joes who have set themselves that challenge, and by God, they do it.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I think you bring up early on, you brought up something that we hear a lot of, or I have, is when you're starting out. You know, I've had people come up to me, yeah, I tried trail running, but, you know, I got shin splints, and so it's not for me, or, you know, I hurt this or I hurt that. And a lot of times they don't go back to it, because it's like, well, I hurt myself. But as you said, it's that take it easy into it.
Take your time.
Yeah, don't rush and say, okay, well, you know, I want to run a 5K, so on the trail, today I'm going to go run 3-4 miles.
Yeah,
whatever.
I've had to tell people bluntly, it's not your knees, dude, it's your excuses.
No, it's a good point.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Because I know it sounds a little harsh to say so, but as a species, all of us, you know, ultra runners and everyone else, we find it very easy to make excuses not to do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you've seen those finishers at Leadville that I just talked about, you know, you just want to tell that person, you know, you just have no idea what you're capable of, dude.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, go stand there at the finish.
Right.
Well, even a couple
And
years.
then come and tell me that you can't do this because of your knees.
Right.
Well, and what you mentioned about Leadville, I think was 2 years ago, maybe 3, and by now, I don't know. At Hardrock, there was somebody that came in like literally last second.
Same with Western States.
But they had like the streets were crowded, everybody was still there, and just screaming and yelling. And this, I mean, I still remember the Hardrock one because I watched it like 4 times.
Right.
And this person is just
Yeah,
sprinting.
that was Dumi. And he and I go out and do projects together.
Oh, that
and
was-
He is the perfect embodiment of the spirit of endurance athletics.
Oh, that was
Because
moving.
he's not your podium finisher.
Yeah.
And the guy is just so enthusiastic about it all. I mean, he's an absolute delight to be around.
It was for me. I watched like 5 or 6 times because it was just so moving. All these people are screaming. And this guy's just putting everything. You're looking at the clock. Oh my gosh, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a great story. But the other thing you guys bring that we talked about is so much experience.
Yes.
Product wise,
Right.
you know, you've been around, tested things. I know, Jason, you talked about one of the first, you know, products you use for a handheld.
Right.
So you both, for UltrAspire, it's inspired by athletes. So you help with
Design.
tinkering, right?
Right.
Product design,
Yeah.
things like that.
Refinement.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
let me
product
ask you guys a question we've already asked some other guests, and this might be a little bit more, you know, personal because you've had a part or a play in this, and you've known Bryce for a long time and the processes he's gone through to develop product. What's your product? What's your favorite UltrAspire product? Because you've been probably a part of building it or designing or helping.
Yeah, you know, it's you know, and it's been fun following Bryce, you know, kind of in the background. We actually haven't had a personal relationship for that whole time by any means, but, you know, starting back from Ultimate Direction and progressing through Nathan and now with UltrAspire, you know, following the product choices that you have and have had has been pretty amazing. And it was always those companies that you went to, you know, if you were a serious runner, That's who you went to.
Right.
And there's a particular pack that Bryce has got in the lineup called the Zygos. It's a medium-sized pack.
Right.
More than a
that
Wasatch.
has a wide variety of uses, and it's very, very versatile. I tend to gravitate towards that pack for a number of reasons. One, I tend to maybe carry a little bit more stuff than most runners. I don't know. I have a particular food regimen that I stick very closely to during these races. I tend to be a little bit cold more frequently than the other people, so I tend to have maybe an extra layer or two, that kind of thing. The Zygos is very functional. Fits like a glove.
It does.
If you've had a chance to use it before, this latest rendition has had some changes from the previous model that was out. And to your point, I was fortunate enough to kind of just have a very small part in that pack. One of the things is, lately the rise of trekking poles, has come on the scene, And I first got the chance to use trekking poles way back in an event called the Trans Rockies that I did.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
It was about, it was, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I guess, something like that now. And borrowed some poles. And, the trick with the poles with a lot of packs is that you've got to stop, take the pack off to put the poles away.
Right.
Same thing, just stop and get them off to use them again. And so just tinkering with an existing UltrAspire pack that I had, developed kind of a way to carry those poles on the back underneath the pack with some shock cord and some, and it allows you to basically get the poles out, use them, put them back in without ever basically breaking the stride.
Right.
My just rough prototype, Bryce was able to turn into something really nice, really streamlined. And it's kind of cool to kind of see that now out in a production model. So you guys can go buy that pack and utilize that technology. And anyway, so I just think that pack it's going to be a great hit. This latest version, I'm real excited for people to be able to get out and
so you're
use
going to
it.
use that one for Nolan's 14?
I think so. Yeah, I'm going to use something either that pack or even maybe the next size up, which is called the Epic.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a little bit bigger pack, but both of those packs are great. And I just like to have a little more gear with me. I like to be comforted out in the mountains. You know?
Gotcha.
I mean, I've been around and long enough to know that when you get caught out,
some hair product.
Exactly. Some hair product. He likes his hair.
He does.
Well, I don't have much hair. It's falling out.
That's true.
A little jealousy.
Yeah, so it's totally jealousy more than anything else.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
So but anyway, I've been out on more than one occasion when you get caught out and you don't have what you need.
Yeah.
So I'd rather be prepared. You know?
Exactly.
That's just me. So.
Yeah.
Well, I had the fortune to wear the Zygos 2 years ago during Wasatch. That was
Okay.
the pack I chose.
Yep.
And some of the shots Joel, he paced me, took of me, had like really good shots with the Zygos.
Nice.
It looked good on me, so I'm gonna
did.
say that. It was
Yeah.
blue. So
Hint.
But it was a great
Model.
it's a great pack because it does. It has enough space. But what I like about that pack though is you talk about how much it holds, but even if you don't pack it, it's not like it's bulky.
No.
So it's not, it's like, well,
It cinches down.
Cinches down
it cinches down
nice.
really nice. And that's why I like it because sometimes I will take extra comfort or weather or whatever it is. But if I don't, it's not like it's just as flapping in the breeze or, sloppy. So that's why.
And that's a
one of the
testament
things-
to the design, right? The
Right.
amount
Yeah.
of time, effort that's gone into proper design. Because,
Right.
you see so many other packs available to consumers these days, and they're just, they don't fit well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So attention to detail, I think, is one of the keys to UltrAspire products, for sure. So,
How about you, Charles? What about you? I know you're kind of the same along the same lines with inspired by athletes, kind of helping with some tweaks or guinea pig type stuff. What product do you like to take out or have with you on the line?
I use a Spry or an Alpha 2, probably of my most popular ones. But I'd like to echo what Jason was saying, that one of the things you appreciate in the packs is the attention to detail. And, I appreciated this even more because since I'm a tinkerer myself, and so I'm quite happy to sit down with a sewing machine and do a prototype. There's nothing like going round all those corners, nooks and crannies and thinking through what on earth the designer had to go through. And then you get an even deeper appreciation for the mastery of design that you've actually been able to put on. I think I would sort of characterize the packs as being the first pack somebody is likely to try is because it was cheap, mass-produced.
Right.
No disrespect to the manufacturers, but they have to be very cost-conscious. And so that puts constraints on their design. And I think once somebody has been out using a pack and then they sort of have some idea of how they would like it to work, that's a good time for them to move into UltrAspire packs, because then they understand the reason why there are so many details that they are the way they are, because they go, oh, I wish I'd had that years ago or whenever. Versatility of design, that it may not be obvious to you when you first use one of the packs why a feature is the way it is, and then of course some adventure comes up and you go, now I get it.
Yeah. Right.
Sheer versatility of design is sort of one of the things that runs through it. And my own experience sort of interacting with the designer, because of course when I was first using this gear, I didn't know Bryce Thatcher from a hole in the ground. And but I'm also the sort of person who doesn't mind sewing extra things on, cutting things up. You know, gear for me is a starting point, not an end point. And Chrissy Mail introduced me to Bryce, and so this was the first sort of gulp moment of, oh, how is he going to feel about the fact that I've done all this to one of his packs? You know, it's a bit like walking up to somebody and wondering, have I just called their baby ugly? Well, not a bit of it. So it led to a sort of fascinating conversation. At least for me, it was fascinating, talking to a real designer about things. And so, and then sort of this experience since then of finding myself sort of used as a bit of a mad scientist of what else can one do with gear. So I very much enjoyed the experience, and I think for anyone listening in who's never really tried on an UltrAspire product, anything you touch on that pack is a solution to someone's problem. Mm-hmm. Almost certainly the feature you touch and is puzzling you or making you wonder, why is this there, is because some athlete came to Bryce and said, look, I'm going to be doing this and I need something which does that, and can you come up with something? And the sheer responsiveness and quickness of turnaround that Bryce sort of, he waves his magic wand and mysteriously a pack appears out of somewhere which has this feature for people. And I think this sort of attention to detail, it sort of makes the brand what it is. And so I very much have enjoyed being sort of a member of the peanut gallery in this process.
Well, I mean, and it's true. I mean, because we talked about early on, but you look at a pack and there are so many, I won't say hidden because they're there, but just uses, between the bungees and the magnets and the adjustments, right? So you can get the fit that you want, but it's not overwhelming either. So it's not like I got to fine tune this thing for a day before I know it's going to fit.
Right.
Yeah, if I can give you just an example, I ended up with conversation with somebody today. You never think of the tape on the edge of a pack as being anything more interesting than wallpaper. But that, to my mind, that microfiber that Bryce found to do the edging around it is actually quite ingenious, because one of the issues with many of the, shall I say, more mass market packs is if the edge of the webbing comes up against your neck, which is quite likely because it'll ride up over the top of your T-shirt, you're going to end up with a chafed neck.
Right.
There's something about the choice of that microfiber where, if that does happen, I think you're very unlikely to end up with a chafed neck because of the way the material lies and interacts with your skin. But it's not obvious to you when you walk up to a pack that grey microfiber has any interesting property at all, but it turns out it does. And there are a whole lot of other little which must be sort of tricks of the trade, I guess, which are inherent in those packs, which I find fascinating when the light bulb for me finally goes off and I go, now I know why that's there. Or why did you choose that textile?
Yeah. Well, it's not a racing stripe, but like you walk into a store, walk in and see it online. It's like, oh, that's a cool, what do you call it, accent color or whatever. But as you said, there is a functionality behind it that some people never know. And like for me, listening to you talk, it's like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I've been wearing them, so that makes a lot of sense. Well, I know you guys have had a long day.
Yeah, we have.
You guys have been the same thing, on your feet, talking to people, doing what you love, and so have we. We want to thank you both so much.
Thank you
for being on the show. We'd love to circle back around when we get a chance. I mean, especially with Nolan's.
Yeah.
I mean, that story would be awesome because that'd be super. And Charles, I mean, what you've got to talk about.
Well, talk about Everest.
Yeah, Everest. Fun. Yeah, really.
And Washburn.
Yeah, some of those type of stories. So. We want to thank you both for being on the show.
Right.
You know, we really appreciate it. Like I said, we'd like to circle back around. But other than that, I think we'll let you guys go. Get some shut-eye. Another big day tomorrow. And,
Happy trails, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for listening to the Trail Manners podcast. Once again, we'd like to thank UltrAspire for the invitation to come and talk to their athletes here at Outdoor Retailer's Show. And a special thanks to Jason and Charles for an incredible show with some amazing stories. We sure would like to get both of you back on in the near future. We also want to encourage you all to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Trail Manners, or swing by our website at trailmanners.com. Once you're there, you can check out our cool gear, represent the Trail Manners Nation, or you can contact us. Let us know what you want to see, who you want to hear, or if you would like to be on our show. So until next time, this is Eric Manning with Joel Hatch reminding you, you don't get what you wish for, you get what you work for. Now go get it.